Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. Thank you, devotees. Seattle devotees are very excited and equally grateful for this wonderful opportunity to be contributing to Bhagavan's Advent Day celebrations 2024. As a part of this offering, we would like to chant 12 namas of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi from his Ashtottaram, 108 names, followed by two reading sections from Face to Face with Sri Ramana Maharshi book, and end our offering with a bhajan. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Chinmudrine Namaha, bestower of supreme wisdom by silence. That which cannot be imparted to others by words can only be taught by mauna, utter silence. The silent presence of Sri Bhagavan was his supreme teaching. Om Chinmudrine Namaha. Trigunatigaha, one who has transcended the three gunas, having no ego, no I sense, and being the pure universal awareness. Bhagavan is a Jivan Mukta, a Sthita Prajna, a Gunatita. His very nature and being is Nirvikara Chidakasha, the immutable sky of pure awareness, transcending all particularities. Om Trigunātigāya Namaha.
Virupaksha Guhavasaha, dweller in Virupaksha cave. The Samadhi of Virupaksha Deva is situated in the Arunachala hill. The one with the third eye, Virupaksha, is one of the names of Shiva. Ramana lived in this cave for approximately 16 years, from 1900 to 1916. It is only from this cave that his supreme state of knowledge began to spread widely. Many advanced seekers of truth have reached his feet at this place and found the fulfillment of their sadhanas. Om Virupaksha Guhavasaya Namaha. Virajadachala-kritihi. Radiantly still. When Ramana was staying in the Virupaksha cave, his potent stillness would be transmitted to the visitors who would also partake of it. Many have witnessed even monkeys and other animals being absolutely quiet in his presence. Om Virajadachala-kritaye Namaha.
Uddipta Nayanayanaha, glowing eyes. The eyes of those abiding in the self reflect that fullness, since for them there are no others. Their looks also evidence that universality. The gracious face of Guru Ramana is lustrous because of his exalted state which pours forth through his eyes. So sings an ardent devotee who has enjoyed it. The sacred name also indicates the fact that Ramana is the one who gives his own state of bliss to those for whom he is the refuge. Om Uddipta Nayanaya Namaha. Purnaha, the fullness of consciousness. The wrong identification of the self with the body is the root cause for the fragmentation of consciousness. Such fragmentation arises when the ego surfaces. Therefore, the ego has to be traced to its source and submerged there. Then consciousness will shine forth like the moon freed from the lunar eclipse. Om Purnaya Namaha.
Rachita Achala Tandavaha, dancer dancing the dance of stillness. Are not dance and stillness contradictory? What is meant by still dance? Consciousness is the stable ground of all movement. To abide in it is to be aware of it. The distinction between the enjoyer and the enjoyment does not exist in that state. In his Arunachala Ashtakam, Ramana has indicated that this state is experienced by one who has searched for the source of the root I thought and reached the heart. That state of mind is referred to in this name. Om Rachitachala Tandavaya Namaha. Gambiraha, deep-rooted. The mind is always in movement. However, when the mind is interned, one is aware of the stillness from which the mind arises. The mind of such a one is in repose, free of all mental disturbances. This is the majesty of knowledge. Om Gambhiraya Namaha.
Paramacharyaha, Supreme Guru. Whoever imparts any field of knowledge is a teacher. However, it's only the person who guides one towards self-knowledge who can be called the Supreme Teacher. Why? Because he is the best knower of jnana, by reason of which everything else is known. When God incarnates to teach a path appropriate to the age, he is the Supreme Guru. Om Paramacharyaya Namaha. Suprasannaha, embodiment of pure grace. Experiencing the auspiciousness of Shiva alone is grace. Generally, grace is regarded as flowing from Shiva's consort, Ambika. However, power and peace are inseparable. Hence, it's also said that Shiva and his consort are inseparable. The wise are aware of this. Om Suprasannaya Namaha.
Abhayaprada, bestower of fearlessness. Separativeness, the feeling that one is apart from others, is the cause of fear. It is only when one sees nothing as apart from the self that fearlessness is possible. Ramana bestows the state on those to whom he is the refuge. Om Abhayapradaya Namaha. Dakshinasya Nibaha, equal to Dakshinamurti. In ancient times, Dakshinamurti taught the sages Sanaka and others through silence. Devotees of Ramana also received their instructions in a like manner from him. Ganapati Muni praises Ramana by saying that he reminds one of his father Dakshinamurti. Muruganar's reference to Bhagavan as one who bestows samadhi without sadhana but merely by his presence is also opposite. Om Dakshinasya Nibhaya Namaha.
Young Balaram Reddy was brought up in spiritually oriented surroundings in a village in Andhra Pradesh. He switched over to Sri Ramana in 1937 from Sri Aurobindo Ashram, where he had gone in 1931. My reminiscences details his long years of spiritual life and sadhana at Sri Ramana Ashramam. Shri Bhagavan was a being whose advent into the world would bless the earth goddess. There is a line in Bhagavatam which says, "They put their feet on the earth and the earth feels blessed." To my mind, Bhagavan was one of the most glorious beings that have ever visited this earth. The more you live with him, the more you feel that you had done something in the past, something great which entitled you to deserve association with Bhagavan. Being with him is being elevated. You need not talk with him. You need not try to learn from him through speech. He was pouring out his grace like the rays of the sun, no stopping ever. Even now he will answer your call, provided you are sincere, utterly sincere. It is hard to describe and wonder to see how Bhagavan bound all with his love. Words would never pass between Bhagavan and his long-standing devotees. Nevertheless, these devotees, whether men, women or children, knew that Bhagavan's love and grace were being showered on them by a single glance, a nod of the head, or perhaps by a simple enquiry from Bhagavan, sometimes not even directly but through a second person. The devotee knew that he was Bhagavan's very own and that he cared for him. In his presence, all distinctions and differences were resolved. Bhagavan was the most considerate and kind-hearted. Even if he appeared indifferent to onlookers, he still took a keen interest in the progress of the seekers. I was helped many times by Bhagavan. For instance, due to a crisis in my family, I was informed that my continuous presence in the village was required. It meant I would have to leave Bhagavan for good. When I received the news, I went and explained it to Bhagavan, who listened and then simply nodded his head. I understood the meaning of this nod only upon receiving a letter from my mother, who wrote that I need not leave the presence of Bhagavan and that she would attend to all the affairs in the village. This was a turning point in my worldly life, and it was due, no doubt, to the direct intervention of Bhagavan's grace. In the first year of my settling down in Tiruvannamalai, where he had shifted for good in 1937, I was sitting in the hall and Bhagavan was explaining a particular spiritual point to me. During the discussion, he asked me to bring a book from the almirah in the hall. Not finding the book, I returned to Bhagavan and sat down again facing him. Then Bhagavan slowly and majestically walked over to the almirah and immediately pulled out the book he had asked me to find. He closed the almirah and, to my surprise, instead of walking back to the couch, came and sat on the floor right next to me. He opened the book and, holding it before my face, asked me to read the particular passage. Bhagavan's attendants used to tell me that his body was like a furnace. Only then, when he sat so close to me, did I understand what they meant. I felt spiritual power emanating from his body like an electric dynamo. I was thrilled to the core of my being. In Bhagavan we found a being that was so surcharged with reality that coming into his presence would effect a dynamic change in us. The divine power of his presence was something remarkable, entirely outstanding. I always felt there was something tangibly distinct in Bhagavan's hall. When he walked into the hall and sat down, we immediately felt that we had entered a different plane of existence. It was as if the world we knew did not exist. Bhagavan's presence, his otherworldliness, would envelop the atmosphere. When we walked out of the hall, we were again confronted with the old world we knew all too well.
Usually, we could not tell if Bhagavan was asleep or awake, though in reality he was always awake to the self. How he managed to remain in that unbroken state of universal awareness and still functioned in a limited physical form remains a mystery. We cannot understand that state. In spite of his exalted state, he interacted with us at our level. He took considerable interest in the functioning of the ashram and the accommodation of visitors. His actions were spontaneous and natural, and by watching him, we learnt how to live in the world. His example was the greatest teaching, and his divine presence far outweighed a lifetime of strenuous sadhana. Just to think of him or sit in his presence used to raise us to higher levels of blessedness. He understood human frailty and was determined to teach us how to transcend it, not dwell upon it. Bhagavan's whole life was simply an offering to the world. Everything he did was for others only. He wanted to liberate us from the mistaken belief that we are this body, mind, and ego. For this he gave the method of self-inquiry and showed us how to practice it. He effectively aided seekers by his powerful presence and grace. One day, when he was still convalescing in the ashram dispensary, I stood at his bedside and simply rested my eyes on him. No words passed between us, but I can never forget those cool, compassionate eyes that opened and bathed me in peace and love. This small event may seem insignificant to the onlooker, yet by that one look, soaked with immeasurable peace and grace, I felt complete security and confidence that his blessings would always be with me. Even now, more than 40 years after he left his body, I feel that the same grace is flowing, enveloping, and guiding me. How can it be described in words? Once the private secretary to the governor of Pondicherry came to the ashram with a long list of questions written in an elaborate, complex style of French. Handing over the paper to Bhagwan, he sat on the window, still opposite the couch. Finding the questions in French, Bhagwan asked me to translate them. As I was struggling with word by word translation and was finding the French difficult to translate, Bhagwan said, "That is not necessary, just tell me the gist." I scanned the questions and told Bhagwan that he really didn't want oral answers, but rather in the form of an experience. Bhagavan paused for a moment and then slowly turned his face in the direction of the questioner and rested eyes on him. After about 30 seconds, I noticed the man's body trembling and shaking all over. Then he blurted out, "Oh no, Bhagavan, not now. Please, Bhagavan, not now." I was standing at the side of Bhagavan, watching this extraordinary scene and wondering what a being this Bhagavan was. He was a storehouse of power, yet so kind, gentle and compassionate. In early 1950, Sitarama Reddy, a minister in Madras government, arrived at the ashram. I was asked by the management to take him to Bhagwan in the Nirvana room. When we walked into Bhagwan's presence, I noticed a peculiar radiance or a strange kind of soft splendor pervading the room. I thought I was seeing this because of my devotion to Bhagwan. As soon as we came out of the room, the minister turned to me and said, "What was that radiance pervading the Maharshi's room?" When he said this without any probing from me, I remembered Ganapati Muni's second verse from Chatvarimshat, who is the repository of all the highest virtues, whose beatific effulgence is hidden by the sheath of the gross body, like the blazing sun hidden behind the clouds. Many incidents in my life have instilled faith in the guiding presence of the Maharishi. I also felt assured that surrendering to him as my Guru was the best decision I had ever made.
A. Devaraja Mudaliyar, a lawyer, used to address Sri Ramana as my father and mother, and sign as Ramana's child. Ramana Sai. He authored the famous Day by Day with Bhagavan and my recollections of Bhagavan Sri Ramana. From about 1936, I used to go to Bhagavan regularly, once almost every month, and stay at the ashram for 3 to 5 days each time. In 1937, I had a remarkable proof of Bhagavan's grace. My office, i.e. the official receiver's office, Chittur, was audited, and as a result of stupid mistake of my clerk, there was a deficit of rupees 70 in the cash balance. I paid the amount as soon as I was told it was missing. If the authorities had taken a strict legal view, they would have called the mistake temporary misappropriation. I was terribly upset because I always had a great name for integrity and was afraid it would be damaged. That night Bhagavan appeared in my dream as an young Brahmin, very handsome and valiant in appearance, and easily without any effort picked up a big snake that was approaching me and put it aside. The audit report did not cause me any harm, and my explanation of it being the clerk's mistake was accepted without any further remark. I gave up my legal practice in 1939 and decided to live in the ashram, where I was allowed to build a one-room cottage. Such permission was rarely given and had been only given to Major Chadwick and Yogi Ramaya. One day a piece of grit got into my eye. Dr. G.S. Melkote, a devotee from Hyderabad, examined the eye and said that the grit had got fixed and he would have to take me to the hospital at Tirunamalai, and if that failed, to Madras, or the eye would be permanently damaged. I was thoroughly upset and was telling Bhagavan mentally, "I came here to have a quiet time and enjoy the peace and happiness of your company. Is it your will that all this should happen?" Then I told Melkote, "Let me put a drop of castor oil and see if the lubrication will discharge the grit." He agreed. We went to Bhagavan's hall. I prostrated before him without telling him anything. Then I took a little castor oil from Bhagavan's attendant and left for my room along with the doctor. By the time we reached the corner, I felt a distant relief. When we got to the room, he examined the eye and found nothing there. He then said, I cannot explain how the grit disappeared. It is clearly the work of your Bhagavan. After a stay of 1 or 2 days at the ashram, I found that the food there did not suit me. This apart, I generally took a very small quantity of rice. Once Bhagavan observed my leaf plate, asked, How do you manage with so little food? I replied, Even when I take so little, my stomach gives me trouble after 1 or 2 days. I cannot properly digest even this quantity. Bhagavan kept quiet, but thereafter I had no trouble with my stomach even when I stayed continuously in the ashram and took all meals. Because of the poor health of my daughter and of the interval of about 10 years since her previous confinement, I was extremely anxious about her delivery. The medical assistance available at her husband's place was minimal. I communicated all this anxiety to Bhagwan through a letter. I got a reply from the ashram that I need not be anxious and that my daughter would have a safe delivery. That was not the sort of reply that was usually sent from the ashram. This was usual. What was usual was something like the following: We hope that by Bhagwan's grace the confinement will be safe. I came back to the ashram telling my son-in-law I would be of no particular use there and to wire me if there was need. After I had been with Bhagwan for 2 or 3 years, I got a letter from my son-in-law stating that my daughter's delivery was safe and smooth. About at the end of 1946, I got a call from a brother to help him in certain case between him and another close relation of ours in a court at Madras. I earnestly prayed to Bhagwan that the case should end without any trial. I wrote to Bhagwan that it was humiliating for me when close relations have proceedings in the court and our domestic concerns get exposed. I was mentally very anxious that the case should not come up for trial. Both parties were stubborn and cantankerous, and a compromise was very improbable. Still, Bhagwan's grace did not fail. The case ended without any trial, but on account of a circumstance which I could never have dreamt of. The party who had complained about my brother and his advocate were both absent when the case was called, and so the complaint was dismissed. A whole volume could be written describing how Bhagwan practiced samatva, equality, and taught us constantly by his example. In his presence, all were alike, high or low, rich or poor, man or woman, child or adult, human or animal. Just as he himself treated all alike, he would never tolerate any special consideration or attention being shown to him more than to any other in the ashram. Many a time it happened that if he observed even little excess in what was served to him of any dish or any delicacy above the quantity served to others, he would flare up with indignation and rebuke whoever was responsible. He used to say, By doing such a thing, you are disgracing me. There cannot be a greater disgrace than this. Once a visiting European lady was sitting opposite to Bhagwan in the hall. Being unaccustomed to squatting on the floor with legs crossed, she stretched out her legs in front. One of the attendants considered this disrespectful to Bhagwan and asked her to fold her legs. The poor lady felt that whereas she came to show respect, she had done something disrespectful, and I had the impression that she almost wept with chagrin. Bhagwan, who reads the hearts and not the acts, felt unhappy for the distress caused to the lady. He told her there was no harm in sitting, as was most comfortable to her. However, she could not be persuaded again to do so. Bhagwan himself was stretching out his legs on the couch, since the rheumatism in his knees had made it painful to sit cross-legged for more than a short time. However, he now sat up cross-legged and could not be persuaded to relax again the whole day. He said, If it's a rule for her, it's a rule for all. I should not stretch out my legs. However much we begged, Bhagwan did not take notice of a foolish act on part of an attendant. He could not be dissuaded at all. It was only the next day that we succeeded in getting him to stretch out his legs, as usual, whenever he felt like it.
Arunachalaya namo namo, Arunachalaya namo namo, Skandaya om 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 namo namo. स्वर्णहस्तकाय नमो नमो स्वर्णहस्तकाय नमो नमो महौजसे ॐ नमो नमो महौजसे ॐ नमो नमो समदृशे ॐ नमो नमो समदृशे ॐ नमो नमो समदृशे ॐ नमो नमो स्कन्दाय ॐ नमो नमो स्कन्दाय ॐ नमो नमो उद्दीप्तनयनाय नमो नमो उद्दीप्तनयनाय नमो नमो महर्षये ॐ नमो नमो महर्षये ॐ नमो नमो सौम्याय ॐ नमो नमो सौम्याय ॐ नमो नमो सौम्याय ॐ नमो नमो स्कन्दाय ॐ नमो नमो स्कन्दाय ॐ नमो नमो जगदोद्धराय नमो नमो जगदोद्धराय नमो नमो उत्तमपुरुषाय नमो नमो उत्तमपुरुषाय नमो नमो जीवन्मुक्ताय नमो नमो जीवन्मुक्ताय नमो नमो जीवन्मुक्ताय नमो नमो स्कन्दाय ॐ नमो नमो स्कन्दाय ॐ नमो 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 ॐ नमो नमो
Om Namo Bhagavate Shrimanaya. Thank you, devotees. We would now like to invite the next Satsang Center to continue the celebrations. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya.